Attorney General Bill Barr, thank you for speaking with CBS News.
Good to be here, Catherine.
As Attorney General, you launched the special counsel John Durham probe. Critics say the Durham report fell flat. What's your response?
Well, I launched the Durham probe not as a criminal investigation, but to get to the bottom of the whole the genesis of the Russiagate scam. And the people who are criticizing it are the people who perpetuated the big lie of Russiagate and advanced that false narrative, peddled it to the American people, and did immense damage to our country, to our institutions, including the FBI. And you know, it's curious that they would say that a investigation that exposed the big lie they were involved in fell flat. Now, they may be measuring it on the grounds that there were no prosecutions or none of the big players were prosecuted. But I've said all along that's dangerous to get into the business of saying that the standard is how many people you prosecute, because the object here was to find out what happened and to tell the story, to get to the bottom of it.
What is the legacy of the FBI's 2016 Russia collusion investigation and special counsel Robert Mueller?
Well, the immediate impact of it, obviously, was to hobble the administration, which was unfair to a newly elected president who legitimately won the investigation. And it divided the American people. It turned a lot of the American people against the FBI and raised serious questions about the FBI. It crippled our foreign policy. It didn't allow us to do the kinds of things we had to do with Russia over the 4 years of the Trump administration, and in some ways really paved the way for Ukraine. And I think the media played a huge role in this and rightfully lost a lot of public trust by their behavior.
Does Special Counsel Durham's recommendation that there should be the creation of a new position to oversee politically sensitive investigations go far enough?
Well, I think a lot of steps have been taken already, and I think some of his proposals are good ones and should be considered, including, you know, having someone in the department review this and sort of play a red team role of pushing back on some of the assumptions that are being made and made sure that that bias is not in play, not just conscious partisan bias, but just bias against individuals and a tendency to give too much credence to things that are what you preconceive the truth to be, and not enough attention to evidence that's inconsistent with your preconceptions, which appears to be what happened in this case.
There's a footnote in the report that says former FBI Director James Comey declined to be interviewed. Did Special Counsel John Durham have the necessary powers and authorities to compel Comey's testimony?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he had all the power and authority he wanted. And as I understand it, I think the report indicates that he did use subpoenas, did grant immunity to certain witnesses. He had the ability to use the grand jury, which he apparently did in some cases. But it doesn't surprise me that, you know, a top person involved in this would not want to testify. My assumption is that had he been subpoenaed, he would have asserted the Fifth Amendment.
You think Comey would have asserted the Fifth Amendment?
That's my guess. That's my guess.
There are certainly no charges brought against the senior FBI leadership. So is that what accountability looks like in this case?
I think accountability looks like if people pay attention to the truth. I mean, there was a lot of attention paid by the media to all the little details that they thought implicated Trump in collusion with Russia, all of which were nonsense. And yet we had a 2-year steady diet of this nonsense from the media. Now they should pay attention to the actual facts in the report. And that's what accountability looks like.
Moving on to the Trump investigations. Do these National Archives records that indicate then President Trump and his advisors were aware of the declassification process create new legal exposure?
You know, I've said all along that of the cases out there right now, the one I'd be most concerned about if I were the former president is the Mar-a-Lago document case.
And why so?
Well, because it doesn't go a lot on intent or anything like that. It's very clear that he had no business having those documents. He was given a long time to send them back, and they were subpoenaed. And I've said all along that, he wouldn't get in trouble probably just for taking them, just as Biden I don't think is going to get in trouble, or Pence is not going to get in trouble. The problem is, what did he do after the government asked for them back and subpoenaed them? And if there's any games being played there, he's going to be very exposed.
What's the impact of former President Trump's statements in that CNN town hall that the records become declassified when they were taken out of the White House?
I don't think that argument's going to fly. I don't think the idea that, he automatically that they were somehow automatically declassified when they were put in the boxes. I don't think that will fly.
Let's move on to the grand jury here in Washington. What does the recent grand jury testimony by the former Vice President Mike Pence tell us about the status of that special counsel investigation?
This is a serious investigation. They're clearly trying to develop a case and get to the bottom of what happened. And I think, calling Pence, and I guess they're going to be bringing in Meadows, they're trying to see whether or not they can show that a crime was violated. I think the January 6th episode is going to be harder to establish a case in.
Given the developments in the grand jury, do you believe that special counsel Jack Smith is close to a charging decision?
My guess is that, and this is just, I'm speculating, but I would think they'd want to do it before the end of the year. It could be later in the summer or in the fall, would be the earliest I would expect it.
And why that timing?
Well, because if they're close to a decision, I think the process of, reviewing that and socializing it with the Attorney General and so forth, and buttoning it up would probably take that long.
In our last interview, you said if President Trump wins in 2024, he will be bent on revenge. Is that still your view?
Well, I'm just quoting him. I mean, he got up in his first rally and started talking about, I am your retribution, I'll be your, sword of justice and so forth. It didn't sound like that's, it sounds like that's what he has in mind. And certainly, some of his acolytes like Bannon have said similar things. So, and knowing his personality, I think that will be a big part of it.
Does he secure the nomination?
I don't think he will. I mean, I'm probably a minority in that right now, but I think that the Republican Party will nominate somebody else. I think there's a big opportunity the Republicans have because I think a majority of the country is actually against the excesses of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party and all the progressive excesses that are going on. And they want to pull back from that. And that is, people of the center right, some centrists, and even some classical or more traditional liberals are upset, don't like what's going on. But they're upset more by Trump, many of them. And so I think if the Republicans put up somebody who will unite the party and not be as divisive as Trump, then I think the Republicans will have a big victory. And that's the point of politics, which is to win, not only win elections, but win with enough strength that you can actually do something. And that's the main problem, another big problem, I think, with Trump, which is, for the Republicans, which is that even if he were to squeeze through somehow, miraculously, he will get trounced in the popular vote, and the Republicans will lose control of the House and will not get control of the Senate.
Who do you think is the strongest candidate in the Republican field? We're seeing DeSantis. He's supposed to enter soon. We've got a new ad from the Virginia Governor Youngkin, and even Brian Kemp could get in.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not for any particular person at this point. I think it's a very good bench of very accomplished governors there, and as well as some non-governors like Tim Scott and so forth. So I'm for whoever can win the nomination under these circumstances.
What do you think the winning issues are for Republicans in 2024?
horror show we see in the Biden administration in front of us every day. It's a complete and utter mess. The border is really just the most visible manifestation of the craziness. But you go across the board, the self-inflicted destruction of our energy independence is another good example.
Are more abortion restrictions a strong issue for Republicans?
Not necessarily. I think the Republicans, my own view, and I've always been a pro-life Republican, and I'm glad that Roe v. Wade was overturned because I think the decision does belong to the people. But there's a distinction between what people like me and other pro-lifers believe, is the moral principle and what we actually embody in our specific secular laws. I would say even St. Thomas Aquinas says that's a big difference. Mm-hmm. And you basically, I think we have to be judicious in what we propose as a law, because I think the laws have to have a substantial support among the people. It has to reflect some kind of consensus. And it has to be a durable solution. It can't be bouncing back and forth all the time. And I think conservatives have to look at what's going on now and say, look, our responsibility is to try to come up with as much as we can agree on, a stable place, and continue to work on the hearts and minds of people, because that's how we've gotten now has been based on changing people's minds.
So do you think at the state level they're becoming too restrictive?
I think in some states they're becoming too restrictive. And at this point, I'm afraid that a number of pro-lifers, feel that this is an opportunity for them to preen their own morality in front of everybody by sort of saying, well, I'm not for any exceptions. Oh, look how great I am. We're talking about rules and restrictions placed on other people, and I think we have to be very careful about that. It's not about us demonstrating our purity. It's about finding something that allows us to live together in a stable way.
The Hunter Biden investigation launched when you were Attorney General. There was a recent meeting of his attorneys, the U.S. Attorney in Delaware, and Justice Department officials here in Washington. What does that tell us about the status of the case? I suspect that they're nearing a charging decision, and there's probably been a lot of hand-wringing in many different places, but I assume that the defense went in there to try to sell what they think would be a way to resolve this without serious charges against Hunter Biden. I suspect that they're going to be unsuccessful. Mm-hmm. A tax case and a gun case, they don't take 5 years to investigate. What do you think explains the delay in reaching a decision to either charge or shut the case?
Well, I think the tax case in and of itself could have been complicated, and it also requires working with the IRS and the tax division for the U.S. Attorney up in Delaware. But I suspect that they've also been going through all the, allegations that have been made about Ukraine and China and Romania and so forth.
What do you make of the fact that these subpoenaed bank records that were obtained by the House Oversight Committee show that at least 9 members of the Biden family received money?
Yeah, that was... that was pretty appalling. But I have, as I did with the Durham investigation, I keep on explaining to people that there's a difference between abuses of power, shameful behavior when you're in power, and so forth, and something that can actually be proven as a crime. And I think to me, I've drawn the conclusion that there was a lot of shameful self-dealing and influence peddling and so forth. And I think the American people should take note, that should be explained and shown to the American people. The question of whether you can prove a crime is a different matter.